The first time the HOA tried to seize my chicken coop, I was standing in my backyard in full sun, watching my hens scratch through bright green grass beside the weathered red boards of the coop, when a fat man in a pink dress shirt and black dress pants marched straight up to my fence and started yelling like he owned the sky. Spit flew from his mouth, his face was red, his stomach pushed against the buttons of that stretched pink shirt, and his voice tore across the quiet afternoon as he waved a stack of papers over his head. He thought he was going to shut me down with a few violation letters. He thought my little flock and my black and red checkered flannel shirt meant simple guy who'll fold. He didn't know that the land under his precious HOA pool and clubhouse was mine. He didn't know I was a licensed land surveyor who had personally verified every inch of my property line. He didn't know the original land grant markers still sat in the soil like buried teeth waiting to bite. And he definitely didn't know that his attempt to take my coop would end with the HOA losing the ground under their own feet. My name is Ryan, I'm 40, and this is how my chickens tore an HOA apart in broad daylight. My place sits at the far edge of the development, where the perfectly trimmed lawns and identical houses end and my wider stretch of land begins. My house is technically in the subdivision, same rules as everyone else, but my lot line doesn't stop at the back fence. It hooks around and runs right along the tree line behind the HOA's pool and clubhouse before cutting across a strip of open ground that everybody just assumed was common area. I let them assume. It wasn't hurting anything. My coop stands in the corner of my yard closest to that strip, a sturdy structure I built myself, clean boards, bright metal roof, fenced run under the open blue sky. I keep about 20 hens, all registered and legal with the county, selling eggs out of a small fridge in my garage. The smell out here is sun-warmed pine, dry hay, and a faint dusty chicken smell that any farm kid would call normal life. When Carl got elected HOA president, everything changed. He's 50 heavy, always in that same pink dress shirt and black dress pants like he thinks he's a banker instead of a man screaming about grass length. The first time he came after me, he stomped across my yard without even knocking, shoes flattening the clover. "This chicken operation," he yelled, voice booming so loud the hens froze, "is an unauthorized agricultural facility. It violates community standards." I wiped my hands on my flannel and asked calmly what rule he was quoting. He shoved a paper at me, words highlighted in neon. It said, "No livestock." I shook my head. "Backyard hens are specifically allowed under county ordinance," I said, "and nothing in the HOA documents bans them." His jowls quivered as he yelled louder. "This is not a farm, this is a planned community. Residents have complained about smell, noise, pests. This coop is coming down." I glanced at the coop, then at the invisible line in the grass where my property stretched beyond what he thought he controlled. I could have ended this right there by showing him the old survey documents, the weird shape of my lot, the easements, the agreements signed before the subdivision even existed. But my gut told me to wait. I wanted to see how far he'd push. "File whatever you're going to file," I said, feeling my jaw tight. "But I'm not moving my coop because you're yelling at me in the sun." His eyes narrowed. "You'll regret that," he shouted, turning so fast his pink shirt pulled tight across his back. The first violation notice showed up that afternoon, taped to my front door, bright orange in the sunlight. "Immediate removal of unauthorized livestock enclosure," it read, "fine $100 per day." I took a photo of it front and back, the way I'd done 1,000 times on job sites when documenting boundary disputes. Old habit. Then I opened my office drawer and pulled out my own set of papers. Original plat map, recorded deed, and a survey I'd done myself when I bought the place. My fingers traced the line where my property wrapped behind the pool fence like a hook. The HOA had built their clubhouse and pool mostly within their own boundaries, but a chunk of the concrete deck, the back corner of the fence, and a strip of their manicured lawn were technically sitting on my land under a use easement that was conditional, not permanent. That easement could be challenged under certain conditions. Conditions like harassment and abuse from the very group benefiting from it. I stood in the doorway with the orange notice crinkling in my hand, the sun hot on my neck and breath deep. I didn't want a war. I wanted my chickens, my work, my peace. But if Carl kept pushing, I had leverage he didn't even know existed. The second notice came 2 days later. This time he claimed unsanitary conditions, accusing my coop of attracting rats and threatening the health of residents using the adjoining recreation facilities. I read it standing in full daylight, the only rats anywhere near this place being the ones sending letters. My coop was spotless, lime in the corners, feed stored in sealed metal cans. It was textbook. I documented everything, photos of clean bedding, secure feeders, the grassy run. I also started another file, this one with Carl's name at the top. The escalation started fast. Within a week, my mailbox became a daily delivery system for harassment. Every bright afternoon, I'd walk down my driveway under the clear blue sky and pull out fresh envelopes with the HOA logo glaring from the corner. Ongoing livestock violation, odor complaint, noise complaint. Each had a different excuse, but they all ended with the same bottom line: more fines. 100 a day became 200, 200 became threats of liens. The language got more dramatic. Residents report constant clucking. Children afraid to play outdoors. Strong offensive smell spreading into adjacent recreational areas. I stood in my yard, breathing the actual air warm, carrying the light scent of hay and dust and nothing like the nightmare they described, and felt anger tighten behind my ribs. I'd worked enough property disputes to know when someone was building a paper trail for a land grab, so I built one of my own. I started a log, neat and precise. Dates, times, letter numbers, exact wording. I recorded the weather each day, the wind direction, the condition of the coop. I took photos in blazing midday light showing clean straw, clear ground, closed feed bins. I bought a cheap decibel meter and kept readings of noise levels at the property line. The hens barely registered over the hum of traffic from the main road. Then came the false reports. One afternoon, a white county truck pulled up by the curb, sun glinting off the windshield. A man in a tan shirt stepped out, clipboard in hand. "You Ryan?" he asked. "I'm animal control. Got a complaint from your HOA about neglected poultry and unsanitary conditions." My stomach dropped, then settled into a familiar, cold place. I nodded and walked him around the side of the house. The coop stood there under the sun, boards straight, roof clean, hens scratching and clucking softly. He checked the birds, the water supply, the feed. He looked at the bedding, the fencing, the run. Sweat rolled down his temple, shining in the light. Finally, he shook his head. "These birds are in better shape than half the ones I see on farms," he said. "I'm closing this, no issue here." "Can I get that in writing?" I asked. He chuckled. "You bet." He wrote it right there on the hood of his truck, sun baking the metal, pen scratching across the form. "No violations observed, conditions appropriate." I made a copy the second he left. That should have been enough to shut Carl up. It was. 2 days later, 2 patrol cars rolled through the neighborhood in the full blaze of afternoon sun and pulled up in front of my place. My heart hammered as 2 deputies stepped out, hands resting casually near their belts. "Afternoon," one said. "We got a call from the HOA about a disorderly dispute at this address, possible threats, aggressive livestock." I stared at them, then looked at my hens pecking calmly in the yard, then at Carl standing down the sidewalk with his arms folded over his pink shirt, yelling at another board member, pointing dramatically toward my property like he was calling in an airstrike. I kept my voice even as I walked the deputies through everything: the letters, the clean bill from animal control, the constant yelling from Carl, the history of my land. I didn't mention the easement yet. Not to them. Not here. Not until I needed to. The deputy listened, nodded, and finally said, "Look, we're not seeing any criminal issue here, just whatever this political mess is." He gave me a sympathetic look. "Document everything," he added quietly. "Guys like that burn themselves eventually." After they left, Carl stormed up to my fence, yelling even louder. "You think you can play games with me?" he shouted, face red, sweat darkening his pink shirt at the collar. "I'll have that coop torn down if I have to bring a crew myself." I leaned on the fence, feeling the rough wood under my palms. "Careful, Carl," I said. "You're getting close to threatening criminal trespass." He jabbed a finger at me. "You don't know who you're dealing with." I didn't answer. I just watched him storm off, his black pants pulling tight as he marched back toward the pool area, the pool that partly sat on my land. That was when he changed tactics. If he couldn't get the county or the cops to shut me down, he'd try to starve me out. The HOA closed the path that ran behind my house along the back of the pool, claiming construction. They fenced off a section that blocked the easiest route I used to bring feed in from the rear drive where I parked my truck. They posted signs claiming the area behind the pool was private HOA property and no owner access allowed. I stood at the fence line looking at those signs stuck into my soil under my sky and felt something in me lock into place. Enough was enough. They wanted to play property games? Fine. They just picked the worst possible target for that. That night, still full daylight stretching into evening, I pulled out my survey gear from the garage. Tripod, total station, prism pole, old but well-maintained. The tools that had paid for this house in the first place. I set them all by the back door, ready for morning. If Carl wanted to push boundaries, I was going to show him exactly where those boundaries were. In court, if necessary. The next morning was blindingly bright, the kind of clear blue sky that makes every edge sharper. I slipped into my black and red checkered flannel shirt, grabbed my gear, and headed straight to the back of my property. The hens clucked curiously as I walked past the coop, but my mind was already locked onto bearings and angles. I set the tripod in the grass, legs planting firmly into the soil at the starting corner marker I'd uncovered years before, an old iron pipe sunk into the earth, top just kissing the surface. I brushed dirt away and felt a familiar satisfaction. It was exactly where it should be. I sighted in, logged the coordinates, and started walking the line around the edge of my parcel. Every reading matched my old survey. Every step confirmed what I already knew. The HOA's fence, a rectangle of black metal enclosing their sparkling blue pool, bit across my boundary like a careless bite out of a sandwich. About 6 feet of their deck and fence on one side and a triangular slice behind the clubhouse. Not massive, but enough. And thanks to the conditions on the old easement agreement, their right to be there depended on not interfering with my reasonable use of my land. Harassing me trying to seize my coop, blocking access, that wasn't reasonable. I took photos, logged positions, and drew a fresh sketch under the harsh daylight. After lunch, I drove to the county recorder's office, building glass shining in the sun. Inside, I pulled the original subdivision plat and the set of easements recorded when the HOA built the clubhouse and pool. My fingers traced the faded ink of a clause that had caught my eye back when I bought the place. Easement shall be subject to revocation upon documented abuse of rights by grantee against grantor in relation to this property. At the time I'd laughed, imagining some long-ago lawyer with trust issues. Now it felt like a loaded gun someone had forgotten was there. I got certified copies of everything, drove home with the envelope on the seat beside me, sunlight warming the paper through the truck window. That evening, the HOA held an emergency meeting in the community room next to the pool, big windows wide open, sunlight pouring in. Carl stood at the front, pink shirt glowing, black pants creased hard, voice already raised as I walked in. "We are here," he yelled, "to address a serious biohazard threatening our recreation facilities. Chickens do not belong in this community. They are unsanitary, noisy, and completely unacceptable." Heads nodded. Some men looked uncomfortable, eyes darting to me. Others just crossed their arms, waiting to see where this went. I took a seat near the back, binder in my lap. Carl waved a handful of forms. "We have multiple complaints," he shouted. "Noise, smell, pests. The board will vote tonight to authorize removal of that coop and revocation of backyard privileges." My heart beat steady, not fast, because tonight wasn't about arguing feelings. Tonight was about facts. When he finally paused for breath, I stood up. "I'd like to respond," I said. He glared at me, cheeks flushed. "You've already wasted enough of this community's time," he yelled. "Sit down." Robert, one of the board members in a navy polo, cleared his throat. "Let him speak," he said. "We need both sides." I walked to the front, every step heavy but controlled. Sunlight from the big windows painted boxes of brightness across the floor. I set my binder on the table, opened it to the animal control report, and held it up. "You told everyone this coop is unsanitary," I said, voice carrying. "You called animal control, they inspected, they found no violations. In fact, they wrote that my birds are well cared for and conditions are appropriate." I passed copies to the board. Murmurs rose. Carl waved his hand. "One inspection doesn't change the experience of residents," he yelled. "We have complaints." "From who?" I asked. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Residents who wish to remain anonymous." I smiled without humor. "Funny thing," I said. "I requested copies of those complaints from the HOA office. You know what I found?" I flipped to the next section and pulled out forms all written in the same handwriting. "These so-called anonymous complaints are all filled out by the same hand, yours." A low buzz rolled through the room. Robert leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the copies. Carl's face went redder. "Documentation," he shouted, "does not have to be perfect. But boundary surveys do," I said, cutting him off. I flipped to my fresh survey map, held it up so the sunlight hit it. "Because you see, Carl, this isn't just about chickens, it's about land." I spread the map on the table, tracing the line with my finger. "This is my parcel, this is the coop well inside my boundary, and this," I let my finger slide along the back edge of the pool fence. "This is your beloved recreation area. Built partly on my land, under an easement that can be revoked if the HOA abuses its rights." The room went dead quiet. You could hear the distant splash of someone in the pool outside, the faint caw of a crow, the hum of the air conditioner. Robert stared at the paper. "Is this accurate?" he asked. I pulled out the certified copies of the original plat and easement. "These are the recorded documents," I said. "I'm not just some guy with a tape measure. I'm a licensed land surveyor. This is my field, and I can bring in independent surveyors to confirm every measurement if needed." Carl exploded. "Lies," he shouted. "Manipulation, you think you can threaten us with some technicality?" His voice cracked as he yelled, face shiny with sweat, pink shirt darkening under the arms. "We'll just condemn your coop anyway." I looked at him steadily. "You keep pushing," I said, "and I'll revoke your easement. Which means a judge can order that fence, that corner of the deck, and a slice of your lawn removed from my land." Or, I shrugged. "We can talk about rent, back rent at market value, for every year you've been sitting on my property while your president tried to bully me off my own ground." Heads turned from me to Carl, then back. The board members looked rattled. For the first time, they seemed to realize this wasn't a simple chicken or no chicken debate. This was a structural problem. A legal landmine under their feet. The board went into a closed-door huddle after that, dragging chairs into the corner of the sunlit room while the rest of us waited. Through the glass wall, I could see them talking fast, hands chopping through the air, papers shuffling in rectangles of bright light on the table. Carl kept jabbing his finger at my map, his pink shirt stretched tight over his stomach, his face flushed as he yelled, but the others were no longer just nodding along. They were shaking their heads, pointing at the easement language, at the certified stamps on the copies. After 20 tense minutes, they came back out. Robert cleared his throat, eyes flicking briefly to me, then to Carl. "We're tabling any enforcement regarding the coop until we can verify the property line issue," he said. Carl whipped around to him. "You can't do that," he yelled, voice echoing off the walls. "He's bluffing." "We're not risking a legal fight over land we might not even own," Robert replied, jaw set. Meeting adjourned. Carl stormed out through the side door, sunlight cutting across him as it swung open. I didn't follow. I'd done what I needed to do in that room. The next step was bigger than the HOA. It was time to bring in the county. The following day, bright and clear, I delivered my survey, my maps, and the recorded documents to the county land office. A senior surveyor named Dale, gray hair, tan face, plaid shirt, met me at the counter, the overhead skylights pouring daylight across the rolled plans we laid out. He checked every measure, every bearing, cross-referencing with their own records. Half an hour later, he leaned back and blew out a slow breath. "You're right," he said. "Their improvements are crossing your line." And the easement, I asked. He tapped the clause with a blunt finger. I've never seen one written this strongly, he said. If you can show abuse tied to this HOA, you've got grounds to challenge it. I slid a folder toward him, copies of the bogus complaints, the animal control report, the string of escalating fines, the blocked access path, photos of the private HOA property signs stuck in my soil. He scanned them, eyebrows lifting higher with each page. You're not just a guy with a beef, he murmured. You've built a solid record. It's my job, I said. Or it was before I went independent, he nodded. I'm sending this to the county attorney, he said. They'll want to talk to you. A week later, under another perfect blue sky, I found myself in a conference room at the county building, sunlight washing over a long table where my maps, documents, and photos were laid out like a crime scene. The county attorney, a lean man in a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, sat at one end. Dale stood beside my latest survey sheet. A representative from the HOA's insurance company sat across from me, looking increasingly uncomfortable as the evidence stacked up. So let me be clear, the attorney said, tapping the easement. The HOA's continued use of this strip of land is contingent on not harassing the grantor, Mr. Ryan here, over his lawful use of his property. And instead of leaving him alone, their president initiated a campaign to remove illegal Coop, filed false complaints, and blocked access paths. He looked up at the insurance rep. That's not great for you. The rep wiped his forehead, the room so bright there was nowhere for his expression to hide. What does Mr. Hollies want? He asked, meaning me. I'd thought about that a lot. I didn't want to be petty. I wanted things fixed, and I wanted consequences. First, I said, I want the HOA to formally recognize my Coop as compliant and to rescind all fines and threats. In writing, the attorney nodded. Done. What else? I looked at the map. Second, I'm revoking the easement as it stands. The insurance rep flinched, which means either that portion of the fence and deck comes off my land or I let the word hang. Or we renegotiate, the attorney said, catching on, at fair market value. Plus, I added, back rent for every year they've sat on my land while treating me like a problem. The insurance rep swallowed hard. You're talking about a big payout, he said. You're talking about avoiding a bigger lawsuit, the attorney replied before I could. One where we ask a judge to order removal of structures and damages for harassment tied directly to the easement. The rep stared at the map, then at the stack of documents showing Carl's behavior. He sighed. What kind of number are we talking? He asked. We ran rough figures, square footage of encroached area, comparative land values, add damages and back use. The total made his eyes widen. I'll need to speak with my people, he murmured. You do that, the attorney said, but understand this isn't going away. The record is clear. Mr. Hollies has been more than patient. When I walked out into the parking lot, sun glaring off windshields, I felt lighter than I had in months. This was no longer a shouting match with a man in a pink shirt. This was a legal process, and I had the upper hand. A few days later, the HOA called another emergency meeting. This one was outside on the lawn near the pool, chairs set up in neat rows under the open sky, everything exposed. No blinds, no shadows. Robert stood at the front with a microphone, face serious. Carl was nowhere in sight. We have important updates, Robert said, and some apologies to make. The grass was crisp under my boots as I walked up to that outdoor meeting, the sun hanging high and bright above the clubhouse roof, glinting off the pool water like shards of glass. Every chair was filled with men, neighbors in t-shirts, polos, work shirts. Faces turned toward the makeshift podium where Robert stood with a stack of papers trembling slightly in his hand. Behind him, the black metal fence that ringed the pool cast long shadows onto the strip of lawn that, as everyone was about to learn, wasn't truly theirs. He cleared his throat, adjusted the mic, and looked straight at me before addressing the crowd. We've completed a preliminary review with the county, he said, voice steady but tight. It appears that a portion of our pool deck and fence are built on land that legally belongs to Ryan. Heads turned toward me. I stayed still, hands resting on the back of a folding chair. Furthermore, Robert continued, we have verified that the easement allowing the HOA to use that land includes a condition requiring that we not interfere with Ryan's lawful use of his own property. That condition has been violated repeatedly. A low rumble rolled through the group. He lifted another page. The county has made it clear that if we don't resolve this with Ryan, we risk a court order that could force removal of structures and damages we can't afford. He took a breath. Our insurance provider has agreed to negotiate a settlement. One of the board members, a tall guy in a gray shirt, stepped up to the mic. We also need to take responsibility for what's happened here, he said. Our president Carl abused his position. He filed false complaints. He pushed for liens and removals that were not supported by law. Effective immediately, he is removed from the board and permanently banned from any role in this HOA. No one clapped. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a necessary amputation. Robert turned to me. Ryan, would you like to speak? The sun was hot on the back of my neck as I walked to the front. I could feel every eye on me, but my heartbeat was steady. I set my binder on the portable podium, looked at the fence, the glinting pool, the clubhouse windows reflecting blue sky, and then at the men who lived here with me. I moved here because I liked the idea of a community that took care of itself, I said, voice carrying easily in the open air. Not because I wanted someone in a pink shirt yelling at me over chickens in broad daylight. A few men chuckled under their breath. I followed the rules, I went on. I checked the ordinances, I kept my coop clean, I did everything by the book. When the HOA came after me, they didn't just threaten my birds, they threatened my home, they lied about me, they tried to turn you against me. I paused, letting that sit. But I'm not just a guy with chickens, I'm a land surveyor, I know boundaries, literally. And when I followed the lines, the truth showed up in black and white. The same group trying to push me off my own property had their pool sitting on mine. I lifted the easement copy, its seal catching the sunlight. The county agrees that I have the right to revoke this. I could have asked a judge to tear down your fence and part of your deck. Some days after the third or fourth screaming visit from Carl, I thought about it. Men shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the pool where their boys swam every weekend. But that's not what I want, I said. I don't want destruction, I want respect. So here's what we've agreed to with the county and the insurer watching. 1. All fines against me are canceled, not just stopped, erased. 2. This HOA will formally recognize my coop as compliant and protected and adopt clear rules supporting small-scale agricultural uses that follow county law. 3. The HOA will pay me for the strip of land under that fence and deck at fair market value plus back compensation for years of use. I let the number hang unspoken, but I knew everyone had heard whispers. It wasn't small, it was enough to sting. Robert stepped up, nodding. The board has voted to accept that agreement, he said. We'll be restructuring our budget and making cuts, but we will not raise dues to cover this. The funds will come from reserves and insurance. And last, I said, picking up again, there's one more condition. The enforcement process changes. No more anonymous complaints funneled through one man. Any violation requires written signed reports and board review, and every homeowner gets access to their records on request. There was a beat of silence, then nods, then murmurs of approval. One man in the front row raised his hand. What about Carl? He called out. Robert's jaw tightened. The county is still reviewing his actions regarding false complaints, he said carefully. There may be charges, that's their decision, but he will never stand at this podium again. I stepped back, letting the sun soak into my shoulders. The worst of it was over. Later that month, the settlement closed. I sat in a lawyer's office with windows so big you could see half the sky, signing papers that transferred that corner of my land to the HOA in exchange for a check that represented years of headaches converted into dollars. Enough to pay off a big chunk of my mortgage. Enough to expand the coop, rebuild the run, and add a small barn for future projects. As I left, check in hand, the lawyer grinned. Not often someone turns a chicken dispute into a land deal like that, he said. I shrugged. Boundaries matter, I replied. At home under another bright blue sky, I stood by my coop and watched my hens wander through the grass, feathers glowing gold and brown in the sun. The fence behind them still enclosed the pool, but now it sat on land honestly paid for. The HOA no longer felt like a landlord hovering over my life. It felt like what it was supposed to be. A group of guys trying to keep the place decent, answerable to the same rules as everyone else. Robert stopped by that afternoon, hands in his pockets, squinting in the light. We're starting a committee to review old easements and property issues, he said. We'd like you on it. I looked at my gear stacked neatly in the garage at the coop at the pool fence. Yeah, I said, I'll help. Someone's gotta make sure we don't step over any more lines. As he walked away, I leaned on the coop fence, feeling the rough wood under my palms, breathing in sun-warmed pine and straw. Carl had tried to seize my chicken coop to prove who was in charge. Instead, he'd proven something else. When you mess with a man who knows exactly where the boundaries are, you might just lose the ground under your own feet.